Members of the national media are falling all over themselves to stoke the fires in Baltimore, passing off rumors of reports and investigations as fact and trying to play detective, making idiots of themselves and doing little more than churning up the hope for more fires, more rock throwing, and more anger. We would believe they should be ashamed of themselves, but we know they're not. Frauds and lemmings rarely show contrition. So buckle up for some hardcore fact and questions without favor. I'm Ed Berliner. This is the fastest 60 minutes in news talk. This is The Hardline.
My brother was mayor in 1968 when he was a very young man in his 30s. And this is not anywhere near what that was in 1968 following the assassination of Martin Luther King. But nonetheless, some of the same symptoms are there that cause some of the unease.
So much about my country is buried and lost in political conversations. Sometimes we forget that North Korea is not just a country veiled in a dictatorship, but that they're all people who have hopes.
We're working since yesterday, and today we're working with the French group and the Belgian group. And together we found 2 people today, 1 dead and 1 alive. And we take it out, and everybody happy.
We now have a political situation where billionaires are literally able to buy elections and candidates. Let's not kid ourselves.
All day, we will fight for Freddie Gray. All night, all day, we will fight for Freddie Gray. All night, all day, we will fight for Freddie Gray.
We are Freddie Gray. We are Michael Brown. The message seems so simple, and at the core would seem to be one that every person of every race and creed needs to accept as possible. But the reality is anything but. Our guest is a man who grew up in Baltimore, whose childhood is full of stories that may have made him the precursor to the issues facing this country and what we're facing today. A columnist for Salon, as well as author of the upcoming book, The Beastside. Let's welcome to the Hardline, D. Watkins. D, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
D, what did you mean exactly by "we are all Freddie Gray"?
I'm saying that, growing up in Baltimore in a really oppressed city with a really high, dense black population, many of us have been the victims of police brutality.
But with regard then to what's happening on the ground today, your article, others, and as I mentioned, the media seems to just be stoking the fires here the last couple of days. Has any level of calm been reached here in the last 24 hours?
Oh my God, man. It was so much beauty happened yesterday. I saw the most diverse rally I've ever seen in my life. It was beautiful. There was so many different people out there, and it was just marching, and there was a lot of positive energy right in front of City Hall. Everyone obeyed the curfew law, and no one was hurt last night, so it was great.
All that wonderful positive energy, D, then where did all that negative energy come from last week, where we saw kids of all ages throwing rocks, being involved in burning, looting, beating up people on the streets? Where did that come from?
It came from frustration. We have a generation of young people who feel like they're oppressed. They feel like their parents were oppressed and their grandparents were oppressed too. And they just, they feel like there was nothing to do but take to the streets. And, I would never condone violence. It just seems like a lot of the peaceful things aren't really bringing about a lot of positive results, and then the negative things are not bringing about positive results. So we need to reach a place where we get rid of the violence and just figure out how we can get these kids to learn how to respect the political process, but also be a part of the political process. Because
but D, let me stop you there as part of the political process, because in the last article, in the last paragraph of your article, you said, we're all starting to believe that holding hands, following pastors, and peaceful protests are pointless. The only option is to rise up. Now, you say you're against violence, but you've got to admit to me that when you say rise up, that leads a lot of people to think that you are out there and possibly inciting violence as well.
No, when I say rise up, I mean take to the streets and challenge our politicians. I don't mean burn down buildings. And when I said the mayor has an easy decision to make, even justice for Freddie Gray or watch the city burn, I literally was standing next to a burning garage, and it was very sad. It was sad.
But what about those who say that the next step for this community has got to be taking that action, getting involved in a political process, not taking to the streets and burning buildings? The people who will say to you that it's your responsibility and it's the community's responsibility to do that rising up and do it peacefully.
I think it is my responsibility, and I challenge others to do the same. I'm working with some guys right now in Baltimore. We're getting together like a huge voter registration drive on top of the community work that I already do as, with literacy and everything. I teach people how to read. I encourage literacy, promote literacy, and run a journalism program. So, I'm out here doing the work, and hopefully other people are doing the same thing.
20 seconds. How do you then feel about people out there in the media who are fomenting this, pouring gasoline on this fire every day?
I think it's disgusting. Hopefully they get a chance to come out to Baltimore and, see some of the peaceful protests and take part. And hopefully we can take all of that negative energy and find a way to turn it into a positive. Dismissing these kids as thugs and horrible people is not going to get us the desired results that we want. We got to engage them and teach them right from wrong and push them out in the right direction.
Dee, let's hope they're listening to you. Again, the article is called In Baltimore, We're All Freddie Gray. Also author of the upcoming book, The Beastside. Dee Watkins, thanks so much for joining us today. Look forward to the next time.
Thank you. You guys have a great show. Have a good one.
Now, there are many sides to this issue, including the one that points to a litany of issues over decades that drove Baltimore to its explosion, backed by more than a few failed governmental policies. Our guest is the Milwaukee County Sheriff, who says that the rioting in Baltimore was caused by failed liberal policies in the city. Sheriff David Clarke joins us. Sheriff, thanks so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Sheriff, why does it take you, as a former law enforcement officer, to say this out loud? Rudy Giuliani said it the other day when he pointed out the fact that liberals have been in control of Baltimore for 40 years. No one else seems to be saying this out loud. What are they afraid of?
Well, the dreaded R word, racist and other not so kind things, and I don't have that fear. I get called the opposite, the Uncle Tom, the traitor, on, and that stuff that just falls off my back like water off a duck's back. Look, when you start peeling the layers back on these failed liberal government policies in many of these urban centers, the reality is staring you right in the face. When you keep people mired because of your policies, when you keep them mired in generational poverty, when you keep their kids shackled to failing public schools where they'll never be able to reach their God-given potential, when you keep them chronically unemployed, living in crime-infested, decaying, rotting neighborhoods, this is the breeding ground. I don't think this causes riots, but it's the breeding ground. And then a catalyst comes along, and the American police officer has been made the straw man in all this. So you have these rare, unfortunate police incidents, and I'm not casting judgment on what happened in Baltimore with Freddie Gray yet because the investigation's ongoing. But you look at some of these other cities, New York with Eric Garner, Ferguson, Missouri with Officer Darren Wilson and Mike Brown, and you look at South Carolina. And this has happened in other cities. It happened in Milwaukee, Wisconsin about a year ago. As a matter of fact, tonight's the one-year anniversary of a police officer deadly use of force against a citizen here in Milwaukee County.
I have about a minute left, Sheriff. I want to make sure that I get something in here, because with the look at all this right now and the look at what is happening right now, in your opinion, will it take African-American lawmakers in Baltimore to say in front of the cameras, to look their people in the eye, look everybody in the eye and say, we have failed you. There has been graft and corruption in this city for 40 years. Black, white, blue, green, male, female. This is the reason why this has happened. That's
what's going to happen, but don't hold your breath waiting for it to happen, because they won't look in the mirror. They want to deflect instead and blame these other outside forces for their own failure.
So they're scared. They're cowards, if you will.
Big-time cowards.
So then how do we get this out to the people? How do you then, what would be your suggestion in 30 seconds to make the people of Baltimore understand that they need to be the ones to rise up here, but not in a violent sense? They're the ones who can enact change, and they have to do it.
Better lifestyle choices. It's a kind of a two-pronged thing, but better lifestyle choices on behalf of members of the black community, and to shun these liberal policies, to shun this big government mindset that government can bail them out of this, because they can't.
However, we're looking at something that you and I both know will not happen overnight.
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. Sheriff David Clarke, you get an awful lot of heat from people, but you speak your mind, and that's why I and so many others appreciate what you say, because it needs to be said out loud many times. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll look forward to speaking to you again.
My pleasure.
All right, take care. It is the situation in Baltimore, and as the sheriff has said here, Congress will not enact any of the president's policies. He says good for them. People need to understand those policies will not help them in Baltimore or any place else. The Hard Line continues.